In this video, I wanted to give a little introduction to Lab 1. So as you can see, this is going to be due on Wednesday, May 12th, no later than 11:59 p.m. And just like our classwork assignments, we're going to turn this in by pushing a commit with the tag lab1 to our Git repository. And we need to turn this in on time, so definitely start early so that you can get help. We're going to practice using if or switch statements. We're going to use functions. Definitely going to get input from the user like we've been doing. And we're going to make sure that our output exactly matches the sample output. So the problem here is we need to write a program that's going to compute someone's total based on the dollar amount of their purchase. So we're going to ask the user for their purchase amount and whether they're in the military or not. If they're in the military, they're going to get a 15% discount if they spend $150 or more. Otherwise, they're going to get a 10% discount. If they're not in the military, they get no discount, and everyone is going to pay a 5% sales tax. And that should be applied after the discount. So not to the original total, but to the discounted total. So if I was working on this, I would definitely pay attention to the requirements and then also to the grading. So let's take a look at some of the requirements. I need to write this in a file called lab1.c, and I specifically need to put it in my repository for this class, in the directory labs, and then also in a lab1 directory. So let's see here, I have my directory for this class. I can run git status and see that this is tracked on Git, and I have no changes that have not been committed. Let's see. I have classwork, labs, and programs, and let's go into labs. There's nothing in here right now, so I'm going to need to make my lab1 directory. And then at this point, so I know that I need to write my program in a file called lab1.c. So I could either make a new file, entirely new file called lab1.c, and then I would write my program in here. But another option, so because I didn't put anything in that file, oh, we didn't even go in, but I didn't put anything in that file, so nothing was created. But we need to be in that directory, so let's just take a look. But I also wanted to show that you can also always start your programs by copying an existing program that you know runs and editing that. So the last thing I was working on was the switch example. And so you can all access this in public examples, chapter 4, ship.c. So that's that ship switch example that we looked at in the switch video. And if I just copy this to where I am right now with the name lab1.c, I can now take a look at what I'm calling lab1.c, and indeed it's this ship switch statements. So maybe I did this because I know I want to use switch statements in this, and I'm going to just edit that. Maybe I just want something that runs, and I'm just going to say that's what I just want to start with something that runs. Now I just have my boilerplate C, and I can just make sure that this runs. I'll call this lab1, compile it into lab1. Oh, what am I doing? I want to run it, getting ahead of myself here. And nothing happens, which is what we expected. But I might, if it were me, I would actually, at this point, just go ahead and do a git status. I see that everything in my current directory is untracked, so I might do something like add everything. So this is saying add everything that's not currently tracked. And also be verbose. That's what the -v is saying. It's verbose, so it's going to print out everything that it adds. And so here I've added to my Git repository both my C file and also my compiled executable file. So in general, it's actually not good practice to put your compiled files into a Git repository. And once we get to using makefiles, we'll see some nice ways to avoid that. But for now, I would say don't worry about it. If you're new to Git, then you can just add everything. If you have more experience with Git, you can just add your C file. But as long as the C file is there, that's all that I care about. If there's extra stuff, that's okay. And we can also talk about it in class more. So I just added those. I'm just going to make a commit just to say add basically add lab1 that doesn't do anything yet. And I'll push that up just to kind of make sure, just demonstrate this whole process of making a commit and making a push. Okay, so I have my blank lab1, or my mostly blank lab1, and at this point I might go through and just look at how am I going to be graded. So it looks like I'm going to need some comments explaining what my program does. So at the very least, I should have one at the top, and I'll just write a to-do to myself, comment explaining what the program does. And then I'm also going to need some comments throughout, just explaining what each function does, etc. I'm going to need make sure that this my code is indented. So one thing I'll notice, both in the grading, I need to compute the discount in its own function, and I also need to print the results in its own function. I can also see in the requirements, it also says that as well. So I might do something like just define those functions for myself right now to make sure that I don't forget about them when I'm writing this, because I'm going to be graded on it. So I want to make sure I get those points. So maybe for now, I don't know what this is going to do. Maybe I say void compute discount, and it's not going to take in anything yet. Probably I'm going to need these to take in something and maybe return something as well. But I can always change my program later. I'm just putting these in so that I know that I'm going to need to define them. And since it's just void, I don't need to name any variables. Did I skip 2 lines there for some reason? Doesn't look like it. Print results. Oh. And so now I just have this reminder to myself that I need to define these functions at some point as I'm developing my program. So another thing I want to point out is that we're given some example output here. Let's see if I can zoom in on this. Unfortunately, I have not looked into how to make this less small. But we can see that when we actually run our lab1, it's going to need to first prompt the user for their cost. So for example, they might put in $217. And so they shouldn't have to put in this dollar, right? that should actually be provided. Our program should write that dollar. Then they're going to put in yes or no, and then all of this is just going to be printed by our program. And so you're going to need to use tabs here to make sure that you get this formatting right. Go back to our regular Zoom. There's some hints if you need. But let's try to compile and run this and see what happens. Actually, maybe we can go back up and use the, okay, we don't get any warnings, and we still don't expect this to do anything. All we did was add some comments and some function definitions, and it still doesn't do anything, which is fine. And then, so my suggestions here are just to make sure that you are developing your program in pieces, get something working, compile it, run it, make sure that it does what you expect, and then get the next thing working. And finally, once you do have your program running, you should try these, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different runs, and copy your program's output into a tool like DiffChecker. So what will this look like? So you would copy the example here, and then you would go to DiffChecker, you would paste what was there, and then you're going to paste whatever your result is. And then you would run find difference. And you might see some differences at the very end, but you don't need to worry about those. So maybe you have spaces at the end of yours and there aren't spaces here. Here, that was just, like, it might look something like this for you. Let's run it. So here I see the only difference between these is there's actually just a space at the end. So you might end up with these spaces at the end, and that's fine. But do ask me if you're having trouble with this. But hopefully this can be a nice way to know that you did it. You're probably going to get a lot of points if you are able to make these match. So that is it for an introduction to Lab 1. Good luck.